water, earth, fire, air.
From South America, my team with the power of heart.
No, not heart. You are useless in Captain Planet, Discount Mowgli, and we're not going to be allowing you to do this episode of Pop Culture Psychology. Instead, we're going to talk about some real badasses that can control the elements, namely a group called Team Avatar from Avatar: The Last Airbender. That group had many similarities to each other, but they were also very different in other ways in regards to personality. So let us use the heroes of the 100 Years' War and talk about the psychological concept of personalities, namely what is called the Big Five personality traits. To make sure we're all on the same page here, let's first define traits and personalities. The easiest way to put it is that traits in regards to personality specifically is a behavior, thought, or feelings in general that are consistent with a person. Remember, the key word here is consistent. It's important. Now, a group of traits is what makes up a personality. In other words, all the personality traits you have, such as being caring or short-tempered or maybe even creative, there's really too many to name. That's what makes up your personality. We all have our own personalities and different traits that make up who we are. They vary greatly from person to person, and no two people are exactly the same. However, there are 5 traits that each and every one of us have, to some degree or another, or the opposite of that trait. These 5 traits are earth, fire, wind, and water. No! Get out of here! No one cares about you. If anything, the Big 5 personality traits are actually linked to only one element, water, as the easiest way to remember them is using the biggest body of water of them all, ocean. Openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. But before we talk about each one of them and how they relate to each member of Team Avatar, it would be a good idea that all of you, or at least some of you, get a refresher on who Team Avatar is. So let's first talk about the world of Avatar and specifically Team Avatar. The story takes place in a world where benders exist. Benders are people who can manipulate the elements of their country. Those countries and elements are the Water Tribe, the Earth Kingdom, the Fire Nation, and the Air Nomads. Among the non-benders and benders, there exists the Avatar, a person who has the ability to use all 4 elements. The Avatar is pretty much an insanely powerful being who reincarnates in a cycle among the countries. The Avatar of the era of the 100-Year War is Aang, and, should be no shocker to anybody, the Last Airbender. I feel like this should be a spoiler, but if you know how to read a TV title, it's obviously not. But there will be some spoilers coming up that is not plastered to every piece of merch, so consider this your warning. But anyway, the countries lived in relative peace. Then the Fire Nation attacked. The Fire Nation wished to conquer all other countries and unite them under the rule of the Fire Lord. The Avatar is the only being with enough power to defeat the Fire Nation and the Fire Lord himself. The problem is the Avatar may have the ability to use all 4 elements and gain super Avatar powers of uber awesome, but he still needs to learn how to use those powers, which at the beginning of the series he hasn't yet. That's because he's a slacker who took a ice entombed nap for 100 years. So Aang sets forth on an adventure to learn how to master the 4 elements, gain the abilities to tap in the power of all the previous avatars, which that is called using the avatar state, and learn the most important thing, friendship. Because as we all know through My Little Pony, friendship is magic. Like bending, except bending can hurt people, so it's better than friendship. Just saying. Yes, Aang doesn't end a world war alone. He is accompanied by Katara and Sokka, oh no. Are you thinking, is anybody else thinking M. Night Shyamalan? Yep. It's like Aang and Katara and Sokka. Okay, now I'm freaking out about it. Is it Sokka or Sokka?
I think it was Sokka.
Okay, we're gonna go with Sokka because I'm sure, and if we're wrong, the rest of the internet is gonna fix it for us in all the comments. So we'll go with Sokka.
We should probably check that online just to be safe.
Let's pause for a second. Let's pause for a second. And let's double check that. Just, you laugh, but that is something that will... Aang doesn't end a world war alone. He is accompanied by Katara and Sokka of the Water Tribe, Toph of the Earth Kingdom, and Zuko of the Fire Nation to help him in his journey. Though the main story is about Aang's journey to become a complete avatar, the real story is about these 5. The dynamic of the group, the depth of each person, and their own personal trials is what really makes Avatar: The Last Airbender so beloved by many of the fandom, or at least what I think is. Each of the individuals are very unique in personality, and each one emphasizes an aspect of the Big 5 personality traits. So let us look at each of these characters and how they really personify each of the big five. So we already talked about how a person's personality can be thought of as a group of traits that create a combination of consistent thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. These traits rarely change in a person, and though they may not always be obvious, they're always present in a person and with how a person thinks and behaves and feels. There is a lot of theories around how many traits there are, how many could exist, but most in the psychology field do believe that there are 5 specific personality traits that can be shared among all human beings. Each of these 5 traits are on a spectrum where each of us falls somewhere on each spectrum. Again, these traits are openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. The big 5. Each member of Team Avatar really showcases one of each of these traits, so let's start with openness and the blind earthbender, Toph Beifong. Toph is the child of an Earth Kingdom noble. She was born blind and her parents treated her as if she was too weak to take care of herself due to her being blind as a viper bat. They were overprotective of her and shut her away from the rest of the world. The reality is, her parents were really the blind ones. Toph is as tough as nails and packs a lot of punch in her tiny fists of fury. Toph is actually a very interesting example of someone who I would consider high in openness. Openness is short for openness to experiences. People who are considered to have a high rating of openness are very imaginative, creative, and adventurous. We can all see that in Toph, I think. See? We can all... Toph can't. Individuals with high openness tend to want new experiences and are open to new ideas. Toph is definitely all of these, and though looking at her... Toph is definitely all the... Damn it. I put the words looking and see too much into this. Ah! Toph is definitely all these, though looking at her on the surface, it may not be easily seen. She definitely does not have strong ties to tradition for tradition's sake. I mean, she was the world champion of the Earth Rumble. That's like being the John Cena of Earthbenders. That is something a regal Earth noble would not exactly seek due to their station. She is definitely imaginative and creative. There is a huge list of ways she found workarounds to problems in her life. She couldn't find an earthbending teacher to show her how to bend? Fine. She'll learn from the badger moles who do it naturally. Blind? No problem. She'll use her earthbending powers now to feel the vibrations of the ground, and that's how she can see. Caught in a metal box, so earthbending couldn't be used to free herself? She actually figured out that metal is just processed minerals from the earth and created metal bending to get herself out. Let me really emphasize that. She created an entirely new way to bend.
Woo! Toph, you rule.
You may call this Toph Ex Machina, but if anyone could figure out metal is part of earthbending, it would totally be Toph. A big part of what makes this blind badass really personify openness is that it's something actually pretty easily overlooked in her. Toph definitely craves to seek out others' thoughts and opinions. She may argue or disagree quickly with many people, but it doesn't mean that she's not open or welcome to their ideas. In fact, I believe the reasons why Toph is so opinionated is that she's listened and absorbed so many perspectives and thoughts that she has a deep wisdom well beyond her years. Even when she isolated herself in her later years in the foggy swamp, it was a well-selected place for her. A large tree in the swamp was connected to the entire world through its roots, and Toph used that tree to be able to, well, stay connected to all the people throughout all the countries. Even as a hermit, she still actively found a way to stay connected and listen to others. High openness does have drawbacks, however. Toph is a good example of all these as well. People with high openness do tend to have difficulty with structure. Toph's parenting style with her children was so lax that when her children did crave some stability, it wasn't something Toph necessarily had the ability to give. Toph also showed difficulty running her own metal bending school proficiently. As an officer in Republic City in later years, I would assume that she was probably great in the field, but someone probably had to pick up the slack when it came to schedules, meeting, and her paperwork. As with many personality traits, too much of something tends to have many drawbacks as it does benefits. But that is not the only one of the big five, nor is it the only character in Team Avatar. Next on the list is conscientiousness. This trait capitalizes on thinking and planning ahead. They tend to be very organized, disciplined, and thorough with their thought process. Like Toph, some of the traits that capitalize on this person may be hard to see on the surface. This trait is actually pretty apparent in the Master of the Star Sword, Sokka. I said his name right, I'm proud of myself. Sokka is the older brother of Katara and the only non-bender of Team Avatar. Though Sokka did not have any raw power that his bending friends had, what he really brought to the team was a lot of his mind.
Hey, we're in enemy territory. Those are enemy birds.
Yes, that Sokka. Especially when he gained some world experience, Sokka is the one on the team that the rest of them leaned on to make tough decisions both pragmatically and for long-term goals. Though thought later to be a poor decision, when the team were behind enemy lines and witnessed the inhabitants of a Fire Nation village slowly getting sick due to pollution, the team wanted to help the villagers. It was Sokka who pointed out that if the team was caught helping this village, it could potentially destroy the chances of stopping the Fire Lord from conquering the world.
We have to do something to help.
No, we can't waste our time here. We have a bigger mission that we need to stay focused on. These people are on their own. I'm not turning my back. I'm just being realistic. We can't go around helping every rinky-dink town we wander into. Come on, Katara, be reasonable about this. You know our mission has to come first.
I guess so.
But part of the team helped anyways, and it all worked out. But make no mistake, Sokka was absolutely correct. They risked a great deal helping those villagers, and it absolutely could have been compromised for not only the Avatar's mission, but it could have been his life if things went really wrong. Though Sokka did not make his plans easily interpreted and had trouble speaking in front of large groups, he still was a key strategist in the final confrontation for the 100-Year War. He was among some of the greatest minds in all of the countries. That speaks a lot about him in regards to his abilities to be well thought out and thorough in his plans. And though he does appear to be a goof-off, do not mistake that as Sokka lacking in self-discipline. Being a warrior among the Northern Water Tribe and trained in the Fire Nation in regards to swordsmanship, that takes a lot of discipline, especially when it comes to the amount of speed in which he learned these things. Showing restraint and using his head instead of his heart in an emotional situation is very reminiscent of conscientiousness of the Big Five. Even when Sokka does follow his heart, you can see there's still some thought put behind it. One thing I would like to point out is that people with low conscientiousness tend to be considered playful, flighty, maybe even a little bit flaky. You could say this about Sokka, but one thing that I would consider in this is his age. I would actually say that this is probably more a maturity thing than an actual personality trait. Though he's not as rigid as many people would be in regards to what is considered to be high in conscientiousness, I would also say he's very respected in his temperament and judgments, as it was seen later in his life. This could be really seen because he was selected as a Water Nation representative in Republic City, and he also became a chieftain. But we should also move on to number 3 of the Big Five, and that would be the main man himself, the man who keeps coming back for more, literally. He gets reincarnated. And through his countless lives, simply known as the Avatar.
Nobody react to what I'm about to tell you. I think that kid might be the Avatar.
That would be Aang. Aang really does personify the trait of extraversion. Born 112 years before the start of the show, Aang is the reincarnation of the previous Avatar, Roku, of the Fire Nation. I was waiting for it. I was like, the second I say Fire Nation, he's gonna fucking do it. I'm not redoing that line. I'm just saying that right now. Being the Avatar was kept secret from him for most of his life. When the war was coming, the air nomads did reveal to Aang that he was indeed the Avatar, and it would be expected of him as the Avatar to step in to either prevent the war or to stop it before it escalates out of control. Burdened by this new responsibility, Aang fled the air temple on his air bison, which is a thing, and crashed into the water, nearly drowning. What saved him was tapping into the Avatar state, instinctually using the water and air bending abilities that he has, turning himself into an ice-encased snow globe where he would remain in stasis for 100 years, freed by Katara later. Aang really showed what it was like being a true extrovert, as there are really a couple misconceptions surrounding extroversion and what really defines it as a personality trait. A good way to break it down is that extroverts feel energized and desire to be in social situations more than needing time alone. It doesn't necessarily mean that extroverts don't want time alone at sometimes, or that they're more interested in people. It just means that being in social situations is what really revitalizes them. This definitely means that they tend to be outgoing, talkative, and friendly, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're good in social situations, such as Aang, who definitely is not. Aang definitely uses time alone to think, meditate, and practice some of his hobbies, but even before he was the Avatar, he was more energetic and strongly desired to be around others. Though there were certainly other factors, one thing that happened to Aang when he was declared the Avatar publicly is that his friends did not want to play with him. They believed that his powers as the Avatar meant that he would make games unfair to whichever side he was on. I think this is actually really important to our little Avatar friend, as I think this was one of the things that made him want to avoid the responsibilities of being the Avatar rather than embracing it. There were other factors that the show gave that definitely mattered, but don't think being restricted from socialization didn't go unnoticed. It is also noteworthy to point out that Aang is easily the most sociable of Team Avatar. Where others enjoyed a good conversation, Aang was the one who actively enjoyed chatting with people just for the sake of chatting with them. Very awkward at times when talking to others, he always did it with a smile. A lot of the times, Aang didn't need an objective when talking to others, just the action of talking to other people was all he needed. And sometimes that's all he really wanted. Engaging with others is something that lightened his spirits and is definitely what he would prefer to do in his free time. Especially with Katara, wink. But now that I mentioned Katara, she is the waterbender and the sister of Sokka. Katara's potential as a waterbender came later in the show, as her home in the Southern Water Tribe did not have waterbending teachers to help her along her way. But she did end up becoming a very powerful healer as well as just an overall general waterbender. It is easy to see why Aang was so drawn to Katara, as she is an interesting example of agreeableness. People who are considered high in agreeableness tend to be very kind, compassionate, and giving. They want to get along with others and they generally desire others to be happy. It would be easy to see how Katara would be rated high in agreeableness with her maternal instincts, desire to help others, and she is definitely someone who I would call a gentle soul. Throughout the series, Katara always showed her giving nature, never willing to not help others when she could, even at high risk. One key example of this is the situation I mentioned earlier with Sokka concerning the Fire Nation village that was being polluted. Where Sokka pragmatically sat back and said it was best to not interfere, it was Katara who dressed up as a local myth called the Painted Lady and went out to give food, heal the sick, and in general ease the suffering of the villagers. Katara could not stand by and allow others to suffer when she could do something to help. That's a really strong example, but think about all the times she helped out Zuko, even when he was considered an enemy, refusing to practice bloodbending because that's a thing, just simply because of the invasive nature of it, and generally trying to give people hope in dark times in this world's history. That really showed Katara's true nature. Yeah, Katara could be a little judgmental at times and overly critical, but this is where I remind everybody that a personality trait is something that is very consistent. Katara was judgmental and critical many times, but after her kindness and forgiveness was generally betrayed. Her first instinct in most situations was to help others before passing judgment. A lot of her stubbornness and hyper-judgmental attitude was also usually stemmed from those who she saw were hurting other people, not just anyone she met. Even then, when these people showed any signs of wanting to change, in time she would be there for them. Think about how many times she forgave Zuko, then he betrayed her, and then she forgave him again. I'm seriously asking. I didn't want to go through all the episodes to find all the situations that happened, because it happened at least once a season, if not more. But she always forgave him and she always gave him another chance.
But I am ready to forgive you.
The traits I do mention tend to be poor factors in leadership roles, as well as individuals with agreeableness also tend to think with their heart more than with their head. And yes, being skeptical, judgmental, non-flexible, and generally putting their own interest above others are all common traits people with low agreeableness, and things we have seen in Katara from time to time. Looking at the context around those situations, in my opinion, not only do they show that they are not consistent to really be a true personality trait, but they're usually shown in some pretty extreme or very specific situations. But her true nature always shines through, as her forgiveness and gentle soul always shines through in the end. Which leads us to the last trait, and very polarizing of a personality in regards to Katara. The last, but certainly not least, Prince Zuko.
Hello, Zuko here.
The son of the very Fire Lord Team Avatar is trying to defeat, Zuko is the once enemy turned friend who made the choice to join Team Avatar in stopping his father's plans for world domination.
I can't believe a year ago my purpose in life was hunting you down. And now...
And now we're friends.
Yeah, we are friends.
Zuko's personality is intense as his firebending. He is short-tempered, unconfident, and is downright moody. He is also my favorite on the team. These are all textbooks of traits that fall under neuroticism. Neuroticism can be, in essence, defined as your emotional stability, but it really is more than that. People high on the neuroticism scale are anxious, easily stressed, and definitely over-worry. They tend to be very self-conscious and, unsurprisingly, easily agitated. All these things are easily said about Zuko, as he is prone to constant outbursts, overly focused on how others see him, and I'm pretty sure his favorite pastime is brooding. Neuroticism tends to be seen as the negative trait of the Big Five, but I hope you guys see by now that, like all Big Five personality traits, only having an extremely high rating in neuroticism is a truly negative thing. Like Zuko, he doubts himself and his self-worth every step of the way through his journey is compromised. In fact, his big motivator in capturing the Avatar is to prove to the Fire Lord, his dad, that he is worthy as a person. Really shows his neuroticism. As if seeking approval from your dad isn't scarring enough, especially when the scarring is literally on the side of your face from your dad, Zuko often shows that he feels alone in the world. Again, a very common trait, neuroticism. Though he has a poor way of showing it, it's actually pretty apparent that he's a sensitive person. This is very common with those with high neuroticism, and it's easy to focus on what others think of you, which means you worry and stress and have anxiety frequently, which in turn makes you feel like an outsider.
You can't sacrifice an entire division like that. Those soldiers love and defend our nation. How can you betray them?
If you really look at Zuko though, he is a passionate person who cares deeply about people, but his lack of self-worth and self-confidence make it hard to see sometimes. Neuroticism tends to be seen purely as negative, as I mentioned, and that is pretty understandable, but what I want to point out is neuroticism has nothing to do with being mean or actually less of a person. In fact, as Zuko grew more accepted by the people he valued and they valued him, he started to value himself. Yes, his temperament did even out as he grew older, but I still think one of his favorite pastimes is being a broody, moody duty. People with low neuroticism, however, tend to be a little too carefree and not be concerned with things that should be a concern to their lives, especially in dangerous situations. In other words, what I'm pretty much trying to get out here is don't separate neuroticism from other traits. Being too high or too low in any of the traits have drawbacks and sometimes benefits, and neuroticism is no different. That's all.
He was one of the best friends I ever had. And he was from the Fire Nation, just like you. If we knew each other back then, do you think we could have been friends too?
What makes Avatar: The Last Airbender so great to me was not only an interesting world with great culture, cool new spin on elemental magic, and a great story, though all those things are definitely great, it was the many, many characters that were so deep and complex, even beyond the ones that we talked about. They were all human. The villains were usually motivated by some self-righteousness or just believing that they were in the right. The heroes were flawed and stumbled along the way, not only just in objective, but as people. That is a really big part of what makes us all being human, and a really great way, if you ask me. But those weaknesses in us are also complemented by another strength. Aang would never have been able to fulfill his tasks in ending the 100-year war if it wasn't for his friends who helped him along the way. What Aang lacked, another person made up for. Just like Aang, none of us are perfect. But we're pretty damn cool if you ask me. We are complemented by others who we in turn complement them. Like the four elements, we are connected. If the all-powerful Avatar Aang and his quirky bunch can be seen as a beloved group by so many people, cut yourself some slack and don't forget to be good to yourself and others. Maybe heart is actually a pretty important element after all. Sorry, Discount Mowgli. You're still Discount Mowgli though. But with that said, thanks for watching and I hope you enjoyed this video. Be like Julie and do the thing. That thing being subscribe and share to all your social medias. Until then though, I'll see you next time. Sorry, I just got a cramp in my foot and it's, yeah. Ah, that got, and then I got a cramp in my foot. Actually, that helped my cramp. Like my body relaxed and I actually like the cramp's gone. I have a cramp in my foot, then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Let's start a couple lines earlier. Thank you.